Hello and welcome to Evenings Upstairs at the McCracken County Public Library. My name is Derek Operle. I'm the news director for WKMS. That's the NPR affiliate out of Murray State University. And tonight we're lucky enough to be joined by Lee Cole, an author from right here in Western Kentucky, a graduate of the Iowa Writers Workshop, currently living in Philadelphia. And we're here to talk about his second novel, Fulfillment. And Lee is going to bring us into this evening with a reading from his new novel.
Thanks, Derek, and thanks, Bobby, and everyone at McCracken. It's really cool to be back, and every time I come back here, it's a blast from the past. I remember all my times working here, especially on the second floor, all the children's books that I had to tote around. So I'm just going to read a brief section. I was thinking about this section today because the characters are eating Starnes barbecue in this scene. And it's set in October. And it's just kind of a fun little section where the two brothers and one of the brothers' wives, his wife Alice, are eating with the family. There's the grandmother Ruth and the brother's mother Kathy, and they're all just kind of having this picnic. So I'll just read a little bit here. October, the smell of smoldering leaves, evening light that seemed to shine through a glass of cider. Emmett ate his barbecue on toast and listened to his Uncle Dale talk about the hot tub business. "You know a recession's on the way when people quit buying hot tubs," he said. "My showroom's empty right now. My job as a salesman, and I'll tell you, it's not an easy job, is to convince your average consumer that his or her budget can accommodate a hot tub purchase even in these uncertain times." Dale and his wife Tanya were dressed in athletic golf clothes, polos and trousers made of some sweat-wicking material. They looked so much alike, the same plump cheeks, the same coppery hair, that they were often confused for siblings. Despite their attire, Emmett had never actually heard of them playing golf. "Brenda Copeland's daughter died in a hot tub," Grandma Ruth said. "You always bring this up, Mom," Dale said. "That was 20 years ago. The new models have safety features." "They have what?" "Safety features," Dale shouted. Ruth swatted this away. "Brenda's daughter passed out from the heat," she said. "They found her the next morning." "Why anybody would pass out? All that steam? It's like being boiled alive." "She had been drinking," Dale said. "And why do you always do this? Bad-mouthing my profession, my livelihood? Do you go around town telling people that hot tubs are death traps?" "I don't go anywhere," Ruth said. "I gave my car away." Emmett, Joel, and Alice glanced at each other, stifling laughter. They had poured bourbon and Sprite into coffee thermoses. Ruth did not abide alcoholic beverages in her field of vision, and were by now a little tipsy. "Changing gears," Tanya said. "I've decided to breed our Yorkie poos." "Oh yeah?" Kathy said. Dale tore a large bite from his sandwich and wiped the sauce from his lips. "A lot of money in Yorkie poos," he said. "They're in high demand," Tanya said. "All the poodle mixes on account of the fact they don't shed. A lot of money. Dogs are recession-proof." "I had a friend as a girl who was bitten by a dog," Ruth said. "Her name was Myrna, like Myrna Loy, and she was never the same." "Emmett, I heard you started at Tempo," Dale said. "I bet they do well in a downturn." "I have no idea about the corporate side of things. I'm just a package handler." "I'm surprised they haven't automated that." "I'm sure they've got their best minds working on it," Joel said. "Well, naturally," Dale said. "Why wouldn't they? To put people ahead of profits," Joel said. "How would you feel if they automated the hot tub industry?" "That'll never happen. You need the human touch to sell a hot tub. You need to convince a potential buyer that he deserves to live out his fantasy of luxury. That's what I do. I tell people what they deserve. I sell fantasies. Can a robot do that?" Joel did not respond, and after a long silence he said, "Is that a rhetorical question?" "The answer's hell no," Dale said. "It would probably be better if package handling was automated," Emmett said. "Then the people who do it could do something else." "What would they do, though?" Joel said. "That's the question." "Something creative," Emmett said. "Emmett's going to write a screenplay and sell it for $1 million, Joel announced at the table. "He just might," Alice said. "I wouldn't be surprised," Joel said. "I'm not being sarcastic." "It's not about the money," Emmett said. "A man with friends and family has untold riches," Dale said. "When the economy goes south, you take stock of your non-material assets. You look around and say, 'What a lucky guy I am.'" "He wants to leave a mark," Alice said. "Surely you can understand that." "Of course," Joel said. "Okay, well, no need to be so dismissive." "All right," Joel said. "What's your idea for a screenplay, Emmett? Let's hear it." "I'm not sure yet," Emmett said. "Have you heard of something called the hero's journey?" "That's like the wheel thing, right? The call to action, known, unknown. I'm skeptical. It's like paint by numbers. If you could follow a recipe and make a piece of art, everybody would do it. Alice let her fork clatter onto the plate. See, this is what I mean, she said. Do you have to act so superior? Can I not give my honest opinion? Alice pushed her chair back from the table and went inside. No one said anything for a while. Everyone but Dale had stopped eating. Untold riches, he said, cheeks full of pork. No greater treasure than family and friends. Thanks.
All right, you guys have just heard a portion of Fulfillment. And for anybody who hasn't read the book, the novel is the tale of a pair of brothers who returned to Kentucky, both from the Paducah area, for very different purposes. One to teach a course at Murray State with his wife in tow, and the other moving because he just needs a job. He just needs to find something to do to fill his time while he dreams of writing a screenplay.
Yeah.
And the various family entanglements and things that kind of get in the way as they try to find purpose in the things that they do, whether that be teaching or working as a package fulfillment person at an Amazon-like facility.
Right.
Lee, talk to us a little bit about the germ of the idea for Fulfillment. Where does that start for you? I know that you actually worked at a place that was very similar to where Emmett works, which is that Amazon-like place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, for me, it was a UPS warehouse in Louisville, and I worked there for 3 years. And, it was just such a strange place to work. I mean, for one thing, just the stuff that comes through the warehouse is so odd, and you get to see what everybody in America is like ordering on Amazon or on, and they order weird stuff. I mean, and some of it would just be like inexplicable. I'm sure there was some explanation for it, but we'd get whole cans were the shipping containers full of like live crickets, for example, and somehow I always got the live cricket cans always got pawned off on me somehow. I don't quite know how that happened, but somebody would get a cricket can, and they were really gross. The crickets gave off body heat, and they smelled bad, and nobody wanted to do them. So I ended up having to do a lot of cricket cans. But you get like huge tractor tires from the John Deere plant in Moline, and you'd get stuff from India, and just all over the world. I always thought that it would be an interesting setting for something. But I never, for a long time, I didn't want to write about it because I didn't want to relive it. It was like boring enough to do that job when I was there.
But so specific.
Yeah, I mean, it was really specific. And there's a lot of specific jargon, that's used there. I mean, people talk about the containers and there's different terms for all the safety stuff. And that always stuck with me. And I think I maybe, when I worked there, I took some notes and tried to write about it a little bit, but it never came to anything. And I just couldn't find a way into it to make it interesting to me. And then at some point, I guess, after my first book, I started revisiting some of those notes and thinking about it, and had this idea about the two brothers who kind of start in the same place in life and take very different paths. And I sort of had this idea for like a heist or a crime plot in the warehouse. Part of that came from just remembering these stories that I have no idea if they were true. But when I worked there were stories about people who would get caught stealing stuff from the cans. One of which has always stuck with me was this woman found out that cash was being shipped and started stealing cash, and the company found out somehow and put like a dye pack in the cash, and so she opened it in the bathroom and got like sprayed with paint, and then tried to run out. So that, I don't know, just stories like that stuck with me, and I was like, oh, that could be an interesting way of writing about what was otherwise a very boring job. So it's like taking the specific kind of concrete details of this place where I worked, and then combining it with these fictional plots about the crime in the warehouse and this betrayal between the two brothers, and somehow they just kind of dovetailed for me, and I went from there.
Yeah, and the brother that's teaching at Murray State, he's teaching about like late stage capitalism and the way that we try to find meaning in life. It's basically like a lecture course where he's talking back and forth with his students about, he lands on this really specific question that you and I have talked about a little bit before, but how do we know that we want what we think we want?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that was sort of a guiding question for the book and something I was thinking a lot about. Part of it was that, you know, I had been trying to write books for a long time and finally published one. And I thought, all right, all my troubles are over. Like, I can just rest on my laurels now. And
the path to riches is before you.
Yeah,
Movie
exactly.
adaptations at your feet.
Right. And it was great. I don't mean to complain, but, you know, it didn't... Publishing, I had built that up in my mind as like the end-all, be-all, right? Like this was going to be like the ultimate sort of accomplishment if you're a writer, is sort of publishing a novel. And it didn't solve all my problems. I still had the same problems. I still had the same insecurities and worries and anxieties. And it made me think, you know, like, this wasn't really what I wanted. I had built this up in my mind as the end-all, be-all, but did I really want this? What does it mean now that I don't feel the fulfillment that I thought I would feel, you know? And I think that was sort of a common theme for a lot of people maybe during the pandemic. It's like, you know, you take some time away from your job, you're stuck at home, and you start thinking, oh, maybe I hate my job, you know? Yeah. Or you're in a marriage or a relationship and you're spending every waking hour with that person, and you realize, oh, maybe I don't like this person. You know, like, I know so many people who broke up during the pandemic, right? And it was like everyone had this moment of like having nothing to do, being stuck at home. Some people longer than others, but I think at the very least there was this kind of pause, and everybody kind of had to reevaluate what gave them meaning, you know, what they were pursuing in life, whether they felt like that was worthwhile. And yeah, I think Joel, who is this professor in the book, is kind of at a juncture like that himself. I mean, he's published a book, albeit in a different sort of academic world than me, but he's pursued this career in academia. He's gotten more or less what he wanted, and he's not fulfilled. And so I was thinking about that, and just in general, like what it means to be in the richest country in the world and to be, you know, bathed in just endless entertainment of all kinds. You know, to have all this stuff. All that stuff that was coming through the warehouse, you know, in the UPS warehouse, and to have all these luxuries at our fingertips and advantages, and to still feel like something is missing, or that it's not enough, or there's always got to be one more thing, you know. So all that was kind of swirling around as I wrote about these characters, and I think all three of them are searching for that meaning that you mentioned in one way or another, and making a lot of mistakes along the way and misbehaving in various ways.
The third character being Alice, the wife of Joel.
Yeah, who is you know, you have Emmett, who really wants to go to Hollywood and be a screenwriter, and he has these kind of naive ideas about how easy that will be. And then Joel, who's kind of wanted to become a successful academic, and he's reached that plateau, but now he's like, what's next? And then there's Alice, who's dissatisfied in her marriage and really wants to sort of go off grid, basically. Like, she's just sort of sick of contemporary life, and she wants to go live on a farm and not have a phone and not have the internet and not just be bombarded by advertisements all the time. And so it's these three people just want these different versions of escape from the present moment. And they're each of them sort of grasping for that in different ways. Yeah.
Like you said, a lot of this is kind of germinating inside of you during COVID.
Among other things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Talk to me about how those three characters. So many people when they are writing people, obviously the people are just different aspects of yourself. Do you recognize pieces of you in those three characters?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, people have asked me, like, who are these people based on, and they're all three sort of based on me and at different phases of my life. Just different ways of thinking about what I wanted or where I wanted my life to go. I mean, I think thinking about Emmett, who is the younger brother and who has these kind of ideas about wanting to be a screenwriter, and is working at the warehouse, like, I was thinking a lot about my younger self, like when I worked in this job and I wanted so badly to be published and to go get my MFA and do the whole thing, sort of what would he think about me now? What if I could sort of meet him and talk to him, and what would we argue about? What would we be angry with each other about, or what would we agree on? So it was a way of kind of thinking about that. And I mean, with Alice, I have that streak in me too of just feeling overwhelmed and angry and just wishing that I could get out from under what feels like a constant sort of barrage of scam texts and advertisements and just all the stuff that's just constantly sort of hitting us day in, day out.
Yeah, that's one of those unique things about literature, is that you're able to take these aspects of yourself and pit them against each other, literally put them in a room and have them have it out in front of you.
Right.
I feel like it can feel, it has to be in some way freeing and allow, do you feel that you grow when you write about yourself like that?
I'd like to believe that I do, but I don't know. I mean, I think for me, writing a book is a way of working through something that's bugging me, and in Groundskeeping, it was sort of the opening sort of sentence of the book, this question about homesickness and what does home mean, and what does it mean to both be attached to a place and want to leave, and to have those sort of mixed up feelings. And for this book, it was the question that you kind of isolated, how do we know that we want what we think we want? And I don't think that you write a book because or work on any piece of art because you want to arrive at a kind of definite answer to that question. But and if you have a kind of definite answer to that question, then it almost feels like a sermon or something. If you know where the book is going to end up and you have this direct message that you're kind of preaching, then I think readers can sometimes feel that they're being lectured to or something. So for me, it's I start with a kind of question, and I try to give different angles on that question and allow the characters to kind of work through it and kind of battle it out in a way. It's like the old thing with Shakespeare plays, where he gave his villains the best versions of their arguments. They weren't just easy targets, And so even if there's a viewpoint that I may not be so amenable to, I still try to give it its due and think through, if a character really believes this, what would be the strongest version of that argument? How can I be charitable to what they believe, even if I don't agree with it? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I think a lot of that argument, that type of argument plays out whenever you have characters in either of your two novels talking about your home state of Kentucky. Because I feel like a lot of people have very specific opinions about Kentucky, whether people love it or people are bewildered by the people that are from here, which a lot of the national media seem to be so much of the time. And you have characters in your book that, Joel particularly seems to almost treat it with disdain or at arm's length at times, where it's just he studies the people that are in his homeland instead of really connecting with them, whereas somebody like Emmett feels to have more compassion for his home.
Yeah, I think that there's this tendency for people to look at rural places or small town America or anything that's sort of in quote unquote flyover country as like something to be studied or almost anthropologically looked at. Like there were all these stories. I remember like after the 2016 election, there were all these like rural safaris where journalists would go into Trump country and be like, what's the real America like? How do we interpret these votes and these people? And there is something obviously pretty condescending about that. And so Joel, I wrote him as sort of a sort of pompous, self-important person, but I don't want to absolve myself of having those feelings sometimes. It's like I'm not necessarily judging him, but it's almost like a way of being self-deprecating or of examining my own tendency to be pompous or self-involved, which I'm sure I'd have. But yeah, and Kentucky especially too, I think is interesting to people who come from the outside, because Western Kentucky isn't Appalachia, and I interestingly have a lot of people who just assume that because I'm from Kentucky, I must be from the mountains. I'm from the mountains. Yeah, I must be from Appalachia. So like I did an interview for this book a few months ago, and it was with Appalachia Now, I think, or something like that.
West Virginia Public Radio or something
like that. And I had to tell them beforehand. I was like, well, I'll do this, but just so you know, I'm not from Appalachia, And they were like, oh, it's fine, don't worry about it. So I guess like the meaning of Appalachia keeps expanding or something, the geographical borders. But yeah, I mean, I don't like the idea of being in the position of like translating Kentucky or rural America or whatever to people on the outside. Like that's the last thing that I really want to do. And I feel like with Groundskeeping, sometimes the book was cast that way, which made me somewhat uncomfortable. But yeah, I mean, to me, it's just kind of the default thing. Whenever I sit down to write something, I know it well. I feel like I have a sense of the way people talk, and I have cultural touchstones and geographic touchstones, and it just comes naturally to me to write about it. But at the same time, I am beginning to think like, well, I haven't lived in Kentucky in like 10 years at this point, so it's maybe I need to do something else. I don't know, write about someplace else, and I mean, to be fair, in this book, there are long sections in New York and Los Angeles too. Yeah. So it's not just limited to Kentucky, and I had a lot of fun writing those sections, if only because if you're writing about a setting, it's just nice to, like, it's like going on vacation or something. You write about a different setting for a while and you take a break,
Yeah, but to give you the benefit of the doubt about like talking about Kentucky, just like so many people are like, well, you can't make fun of my little brother because he's my little brother.
Right.
Like only I'm allowed to make fun of somebody in my family. I can tease him, but
right.
You're from here. I feel like there's part of who you are that you're from Kentucky.
Yeah, and I don't take that sense of ownership, lightly. And yeah, it does bother me whenever I hear kind of flippant remarks about the South or rural places, especially from people who haven't spent a lot of time there. On the flip side, there are a lot of people in small towns who've never been or spent much time in big cities who make flip remarks about those places too. So, it depends on who I'm with and the context, and if I feel like that person has earned, I guess, the right to kind of talk about something, if that makes sense. I don't know. Do you kind of know what I mean?
Like, I get you. Even though you're writing about a rural setting, there's a lot of technology in your book. There's a lot of late stage capitalism type things that pop up like ever presently, like ED medication ads that are just on the side of the road, constant just like dings of Emmett's phone where it's telling him some message from a company that wants him to learn something. Yeah. Can you talk about, especially now, like where we are more at the whim of technology than ever, and advertising, how that played into this novel?
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody can kind of relate to that on some level at this point, right? Like it shouldn't be a surprise to anyone that our phones are constantly going off with advertisements and scams and you know, I mean that's nothing new. I think it's intensified a lot in the last like few years, but yeah, I mean I think like I wrote a little bit about AI in the book too. There's sort of this scam call. The grandmother receives a call from someone who's cloned Joel's voice, which is, I don't know if people know this, but it's a real thing now. It's a real scam where you just take a few minutes of audio or a few seconds of audio from somebody's voice and you can clone it and use it to make these kind of, you know, calls and trick the elderly into giving you money or whatever. And so I had heard about this on some podcast, and I was like, oh, this is so interesting and so dystopian, and I want to write about it. And so, there's this moment in the book where Joel answers the phone and hears his own voice, you know, and then something about that just gives me the creeps. And you know, Joel's storyline has a lot of the tech stuff in it and a lot of kind of paranoia. And I don't know, I think that's something people, I mean, I know I feel it, and I imagine that other people can relate to it too, just this feeling of technology kind of overtaking our lives and constantly being advertised to. I mean, on the way over here, I was thinking what a nice thing it is to have a public library like this, where you're not expected to buy anything, you know? What a rare and nice thing that is, to have some place to go where you're not being advertised to constantly, and there's not this, you know, barrage of scams and everything else. I remember this moment working here once where I was talking to someone about a late fee on their book. I was behind the desk, and they said, well, I'm going to take my business to Books A Million.
My business.
And I was like, well, we're not in competition with Books A Million. So that was a nice moment, you know. And I don't know, I cherish things like that are public and free and don't involve the market, you know. And I think that's, in some way or another, what a lot of these characters are sick of.
Yeah, the AI voice stuff has gotten so sophisticated now that they market that tech to public radio companies, to stations, where they'll literally say, oh, do you want to save time and not have to do a newscast? You could just copy and paste whatever you want Derek to say, and it can just replicate my voice. We've never used it and never plan to, but so that's the level of sophistication that it's now reached, that they are marketing it that way. And I also believe, Bobby, there's no late fees anymore, right? So, okay, what Lee said, no late fees at McCracken County Public Library.
That's one thing that came out of COVID.
Yeah.
No late fees.
What other, we were talking about, obviously, the section that you read, they're eating starns.
Mm-hmm.
What other Western Kentucky landmarks are strewn through all about this, and how did you decide which ones you were going to highlight? Obviously, there's scenes set on Murray State's campus.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about how you decide to describe this place, your home.
Well, I mean, I don't have a really rigid idea about like getting things exactly right because I'm writing fiction, right? So a lot of times I'll be using the atmosphere of a place or kind of the feeling of it rather than trying to do like what a journalist does or something, or a nonfiction writer, and get it right down to a T or something. But some people may have recognized the silver dollar, which I think I called the silver dagger in the book.
Silver bullet.
Or silver bullet, yeah, sorry. Yeah. The silver dollar's in Louisville. I lived right down the street from a bar called the Silver Dollar there. Yeah, and I don't know. But again, like that was, I use some aspects of that place, but I don't feel guilty about taking other details from other like dive bars or settings. You know, it's like I'm writing a novel. You know, I don't have to feel beholden to the truth, which is the nice thing. But I'm sure there are other things that get mentioned. Now I'm having trouble remembering. I know Beaver Dam is mentioned at some point. I feel like I try to capture the essence or the feeling of this place, or any place that I'm writing about. It's not just Kentucky, but not necessarily writing about it in a kind of journalistic way.
As we heard in the section that you read, you really try to bring humor into your dialogue. I feel like that's a big part of how so many of your characters become really likable, is they're funny to read. How do you sit down and write something that's gonna, you heard people laughing in here almost the whole time you were reading. Yeah. How do you do that?
I don't know. Well, it's interesting because some people have read the book and said to me, "Man, this book was really sad," or "This is really dark," and then other people have read it and said, "I couldn't stop laughing. This was so funny the whole time." And so that there have, for this book especially, there have been kind of divergent reactions to it. Like the guy who did the audiobook emailed me, the guy who read for the audiobook, and said, "This was so wickedly funny. I was laughing as I was recording this." And then there are other people who are, there's a long section in here where Joel pretends to be like a spy novelist at a book festival. And I've read that passage at a couple of events, and it gets laughs. But then I was talking to Zia about it actually, and he was like, "Oh, I thought that chapter was really sad. I thought it was really dark." So I never know necessarily what's going to land with people. And by the time you're revising a novel, you've read the same lines of dialogue so many times that you don't have any idea whether it's funny anymore. And you have to rely on other people, other readers, to tell you whether it's funny. But I don't know. I think for some characters, there's a character who works at the warehouse named Caleb, and he's constantly using malapropisms, which are sort of combining two idioms into one, and I always have found that really funny. So an example would be, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't look him in the mouth. And it's like these little folksy sayings that are somehow get welded together in somebody's mind. Or at one point, Caleb's trying to talk about Sigmund Freud, and he's like Sigmund and Roy, the two famous psychologists.
Yeah.
So I don't know. That was a lot of fun coming up with those malapropisms. But for other characters, it's always funny to me when a character is pompous and they get deflated in some way. Self-importance is funny to me. I don't know. It's hard to teach. I haven't taught in a while, but when I was teaching fiction writing, it's like humor is really hard to teach because it's something you kind of have to intuit. And to explain a joke just kills it immediately.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's a long way of saying I'm not totally sure, but I don't know if it always works, but it's always great to get laughs. Because as a writer, you get very few forms of direct feedback on your work. No one has broken down sobbing during a reading that I've done before, but people do laugh. And so when that happens, it's at least I have some clue that what I've written is reaching them in some way.
Gotcha. You have a character that wants to become a screenwriter in Emmett, and I feel like, much like it can be hard for actors to act like a character that's acting poorly. You're having to write like a character who is struggling to write when you're writing in Emmett. How do you go about doing that? Because you're also you're making jokes about storytelling structure with the hero's journey, like Joseph Campbell stuff.
Yeah. Well, there's a great character in The Sopranos, Christopher, who's trying to be a screenwriter, and that plotline is so funny. And you, at certain points, you see the stuff that he's trying to write, and it's riddled with misspellings and just so. It's almost a little mean to him as a character. but feels plausible. So maybe I was thinking about that a little bit. I've tried to do some screenwriting. It's never really come to anything. But when you get into that, there are suddenly all these people ready to tell you the secrets to screenwriting. And it often involves this thing called the hero's journey, which is like this idea that you can kind of map a kind of common structure onto all these novels and movies and any kind of storytelling. So, I think the basic idea is that there's like the hero has his like everyday ordinary life. He's called to action or adventure by some outside force. He has to fight battles in that other world, and then he comes full circle back to his ordinary life. And so the classic examples are like The Matrix or something, or Star Wars, or whatever.
He refuses the call, and then he ultimately succumbs to his fate, which is to be a hero.
Right. And I mean, that kind of advice is useful, I think, for some people who are trying to do that as a career. But it also can produce pretty formulaic stories, because after all, it's a formula, right? You're sort of following a recipe. And so I think I've always been a little bit suspicious of any kind of like shortcuts or like get rich quick kind of schemes for making art.
Save the cat.
Yeah,
right?
Save the Cat is another one that people were constantly sort of recommending that book to me when I was trying to do some screenplays. And so I was thinking about that and trying to poke fun at it a little bit, which not necessarily poke fun at people who try to write screenplays, but just poke fun at like the advice that you get and how it can kind of lead to bad storytelling. I think Emmett, the screenplay he's writing is called The Package Handler, which Alice sort of makes fun of him because it sounds sort of homoerotic. I had a lot of fun working on those scenes, though, because went back to a lot of these old resources that are sort of exist out there for screenwriters, and it was fun to do.
I obviously don't know how many people here have read it or not. Are we talking about the ending here, or what do you want to do? Like, I don't.
Oh, we can talk. I mean, I don't know. It's been a while since it came out, so.
Okay. Okay. Let's talk about where all of the characters eventually kind of land, because I feel like you, much like we talked about, if you have like a firm ending, it actually ends up feeling like, oh yeah, he feels like this is the way to end it, or this is definite. Like there's no open-endedness. But I feel like you kind of have an ellipses at the end of your story, like so many do. Like, can you kind of talk about how you decided to land the characters where they are?
Yeah, I mean, I think I initially wrote a much longer ending that spends more time with each of the three characters. So the book is in third person, but it jumps around from character to character. So there'll be one chapter about Alice, one chapter about Emmett, one chapter about Joel. And I had always thought, like, well, in the book with three chapters, sort of three epilogues almost, one for each of these characters to sort of tell the reader where they ended up. And my editor was like, let's just do Emmett. Let's just have one final chapter and have it be in Emmett's point of view. I was reluctant at the time, but I think looking back, I really agree that it was the right move, because the end was just so long. It was like an extra 90 pages, and it was sort of after the climax of the book, when sort of the betrayal between the brothers comes to a head. I think, if you're writing fiction that's, I guess, literary fiction, you probably don't want to just have a kind of happily ever after ending or tie up everything really neatly with a bow, because those stories don't necessarily stick with your reader in the way that an open-ended story does, at least not for me. I mean, people have different tastes and different preferences for stories, but for me, like, the stories that I often really think about are the ones where they're not quite totally resolved, and there are these lingering questions, and you have a sense of where the characters end up, but you're not totally sure how things will go for them, and that's, that feels truer to life to me than an ending where everything is sort of set in stone and you know exactly where everyone ended up, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now that this book came out in June, you've been talking about you've started work on the next one.
Yeah.
And the last time that we talked, you said you were leaning into something that was more genre focused, maybe leaning more into the crime aspect of the heist that you see in Fulfillment.
Mm-hmm.
Is that still what you're working on?
Yeah, crime. It is more of a crime book, but you know, and it's set in Kentucky also. But it's also about kind of what it means to come into a town as an outsider. It's about a photographer who comes into a small town and is interested in solving a series of crimes that happen there. And she's this artist and has these kind of highfalutin ideas about what it means to be an artist and really believes in the project that she's doing. And she's immersing herself in this place where she's not from. And so, I don't know, that tension is just interesting to me. I mean, I know I watch a ton of like true crime documentaries, and I'm kind of a true crime junkie. And it's often that way, right? It's often like the filmmaker isn't from the place. Sometimes they are, but a lot of times they're coming from the outside and sort of mining the place for material and you know, using the tragedy in some way to make a piece of art. And I don't know, that I guess I think in some ways all of my writing is interested in that to some extent. Like, what is the cost of art making? You know, can it veer into exploitation? Is a really good piece of art worth that? You know, like if somebody goes into a town and mines it for material, but then they make a really great movie, like, was that okay? You know, and I think these are complicated questions, and I don't really have an answer, but that tension, that conflict has always been really interesting to me. This tension between like the outsider and the people who are there, the stranger who comes to town, you know. So that's what I've been thinking about a lot. But yeah, there is this crime element to it, and so I've been reading a lot of like Patricia Highsmith, The Talented Mr. Ripley, and stuff like that. A lot of crime books lately, and just yeah, it's been fun thinking about a mystery plot, which is something that I haven't done before and is new to me, but it's really fun to work on.
Gotcha. And at this juncture where the publication of the book is in the rear view, it's now been out in the world for a while. What do people think about the book? What's the reaction that you've received, whether from here at home or abroad?
It's been good. I mean, like I said, you know, I was talking about the humor in the book. There have been sort of divergent, you know, reactions about that. But that's, you know, that was my hope. I think that, you know, people read it and have a few laughs and think about the present moment. Think about the absurd that's embedded in the present moment. And you know, I think most of the people that I've talked to about it have picked up on that, or they've sort of engaged with it on that level, and that's been great. I mean, yeah, like I said, it's rare for most of the time. Writers are working alone in a silent room, you know. And if you're like a stand-up comedian or something, or a musician, you get this feedback often.
Immediate.
From your audience that you've done something good, you know. But if you're a novelist, you work for years on a project and don't get any feedback really, and then you go take it out into the world and it's out of your hands, and that's scary to some extent. But the good thing is that you finally do get that feedback, and you make connections with people, you make connections with your audience, and so that's been great. Yeah.
Obviously, Groundskeeping came out a couple years ago at this point. What's the experience been like when you contrast the two? like from going from your first novel to your second, either writing it or just getting it out? You've been now doing a couple different tour dates around the country, doing readings and Q&As. What's it all been like to now have this experience twice?
I mean, it's been pretty different. I mean, the first book got the Today Show pick, which was a surprise and not something that I counted on, for a second book, because it's such a anomaly, right? It's very few people get those picks. So I was really grateful for that, and I think it got the novel out into a lot of people's hands that it wouldn't have otherwise gotten out to. With this one, I mean, I knew it was going to be a darker book. I knew it was going to be a little more satirical, and I knew that it maybe wouldn't appeal to exactly the same audience that the first one appealed to, but I feel really, proud of this one, and I think it reflects, how I am thinking about the world at the moment, and I felt like, in a way, I could be a little more honest in this book than I was in the first one, and the people who have really responded well to it, I think, have picked up on that and appreciated it.
Gotcha. You said you've been reading a lot of Patricia Highsmith. What else has really tickled your brain recently?
Oh, that's a good question. I went on a kick of reading medieval lit. I was reading Beowulf and the poetry of Taliesin, who's this Welsh poet, and I'm just a medieval history nerd, so that was my treat after the tour of this book. I was I'm going to read some medieval stuff. But besides Patricia Highsmith, I just started a new Barbara Ehrenreich book. Well, it's not new; it's old, but new to me. Called Bright-Sided. I don't know if you've read it. I love all of her stuff, though, and I've been sort of working my way methodically through it, and she's just great. So that's probably been one of the better ones that I've started recently.
One of the weird things that I wrote down that I was this just occurred to me over the past couple weeks is obviously we talked about the question that is central to your book. Are you an S.G. Goodman fan?
I'm not. No.
She's a musician with local roots.
Okay.
She's and now she's starting to get a little more shine out there. And she has this song called Heaven's Song. And it's the last song on her album that came out also this summer, weirdly enough.
Okay.
And the whole arc of the song is this road trip that she goes on, basically with the archetypes of death and fate and all this thing. And the chorus of the song is, maybe if I see it, then I'll want it.
I like that.
And that, it just, it struck quite a chord for me that these two West Kentucky people around the same age are trying to process what do we how do we arrive at our fantasies? How do we decide what we want in life? How do we know what it is? Can you talk a little bit more about, obviously you haven't listened to the song, but can you talk a little bit more about that question? Because I do feel obviously, it is one of the centerpieces of the book. And I think it's what a lot of people are thinking about right now, when so much is changing.
Yeah, well, I think it's generational a little bit too, probably. I mean, when my parents were my age, the median price of a home was, the median salary was a quarter of the median price of a home. Now it's a 13th or a 14th or something. You'd have to work 4 years in the 80s to save up enough to buy a house, and you'd have to work 13 years now to save up, to buy the median sort of house, right? And there are all sorts of other ways that I think what we generationally maybe hoped for or imagined for our lives, that it's just not happening, you know. And there are a lot of people with a lot of college debt. They were, you know, we were told that, you know, go to college, take on all this debt, and it would be worthwhile in some way. And a lot of people are still paying that off, and it hasn't been worthwhile, you know. I feel bad for all the people who learned how to code, and now like the ChatGPT and all the AI stuff is taking over those like positions, right? So yeah, I mean, I think there's maybe a kind of generational thing. Not maybe, definitely a generational thing where people who are maybe closer to our age feel like we're sort of unsure what the future looks like, and it's hard to be optimistic about it. But that's not true for everyone, you know. There are some people who I'm sure, you know, are doing quite well and don't have those same kind of fears and anxieties. But yeah, that's very much what I wanted to write about in this book, is that uncertainty about the future and this search for meaning. You know, what does it mean to have what is the good life? What does it mean to be fulfilled? How do we reach that, you know? And in America right now, there are real material obstacles to kind of getting to that for a lot of people. So, yeah, I don't pretend to think, you know that I don't have the answers necessarily, but that's the great thing about fiction, is you can kind of explore the questions without arriving at a definite answer. So I hope that's what the book does. Yeah.
If you were gonna recommend people that have read this book and really enjoyed it, what are things that you would like want to put in their queue for them? Are there other books or movies or music that you would be like, you like this, you like what I did, I think you would really like this?
Yeah, that's a tough one. You know, actually I have a good example, or a good one. There's a documentary called American Movie. Have you seen this?
We screened it in September at Maiden Alley.
It's maybe my...
Yeah.
It's maybe my favorite movie. My favorite documentary, definitely. But it's about this guy who really wants to be a director, and he's working on a horror film in like small town Wisconsin, basically. Mark Borchardt, is that his name?
Yeah.
Yeah. And he's kind of a loser. I think he would probably say that about himself in the movie. But he has these big dreams of escape and fame, and he's making this movie with his friends. And it's just so funny and sad and kind of tender, you know, in ways that I did not expect when I started it. And not a lot of people have seen it, I feel like. So maybe that would be my recommendation.
Yeah, American Movie, for anybody that hasn't seen it, really incredible film, because the documentarian that made it had such access to Mark Borchardt that, like, you see a person trying to make, at first he's trying to make a feature film at the start of the movie, and then he's like, I need to make a short film so that I could finance the feature film first.
Yeah.
And then it's like all this interplay where he's trying to get money from his uncle, his friends are helping him do the soundtrack and the score. And you're just watching this person struggle in the uphill battle to create a piece of art, and how hard it is, and how his friends and family help him try to make that happen.
Yeah, it's really good.
I think we are approaching the end of our time, but do you want to open it up for some questions?
Sure, that'd be fine.
Does anybody have cues that Lee can A?
I have a question.
Yeah.
I had a regular job. What is a day in the life of a writer?
Well, it depends on the day, but
Can you repeat the question, please?
I'll repeat it for Lee. He asked, what is a day in the life of a writer?
yeah. I mean, it's laying in bed and scrolling for a while. You know, I try to keep somewhat regular hours when I'm really working heavily on a project. I mean, because this just came out, I haven't been keeping as regular a schedule, but when I am really in the middle of something, I get up and start writing, and I write until, usually mid-afternoon, 2 or 3. You do reach diminishing returns just typing. It's like there are times when you're like, oh, I could keep writing, but then the quality would suffer, and so it's not always worth it. But reading is also a really important part of a writer's life, and so you have to keep sharp, by reading current fiction or fiction that feels like it's related to what you're working on, and that keeps you inspired. And so I think there are limits to how much you can do actually typing in a day before the quality starts to suffer, for me anyway. But I know there are people like John Grisham, for example, who work from like 9 to 5 every day. They make it like a regular kind of day job. And I don't know. I don't think I could keep up that level of intensity.
It's hard enough whenever I don't. My job isn't 9 to 5, but I do write every day, and it's hard enough just writing stuff that's real.
Yeah, yeah.